Thank you. So hello, hi, I'm Christine, and I run an online learning platform called Moon Learning, where I talk and teach about UX, UI, and these days primarily Figma. And one of the subjects that gets most demand and most attention is usually when I run videos and workshops about responsive design in Figma, especially auto layout, which is one of the trickiest features. So what I want to do today is I want to show you some old and some new ways how we can deal with responsive design in Figma. And I also want to touch on a new subject, which is container queries. And I want to have some thoughts about how in Figma we can already start preparing and planning for those container queries and improve our conversation with development. Now, that's the official reason I was invited today, but actually the real reason I was invited is because I have a secret superpower, and it's really cool. And my secret superpower is I can make all of you feel 10 years younger with one click. So if you're ready, we're going to do that. OK, so 1, 2, 3. Here you go. Can you feel the youth returning to your bodies, those memories rushing back, right? So who does not know what this is? Hands up. My only hands up, so there you go. Oh, really? Do your parents know you're here? I'm like, really? OK, you better do some ID work before giving out alcoholic beverages. So don't worry, that has absolutely no relevance for the rest of the talk, but this is how it started. So how it all started in the old days, right after the Big Bang, was that this is how we designed for the web. We had 960 pixels. You could choose between 12 and 16 columns, and you put your designs in there, and that was it. If you got really adventurous, a little bit of white space left and right, a bit of color maybe even, and that's your design. There was no mobile, there were no different screen sizes, no different viewports. So you might say, well, that sounds like glorious time for designers. One design, all perfection to the last pixel. It could have been amazing, but it was dark and gloomy and terrible times for designers. Because we didn't have design software, we only had Photoshop to design in. Now, don't get me wrong, I have no problem with Photoshop. I like Photoshop for editing photos. That's why they called it Photoshop. But I don't like it for UI design. There is no components, there's no styles. It's really tedious to do changes. It's not even vector-based, so we were locked in this bitmap hell for a long time. Now, stuff started moving for web design, and I think it was about 2009 where the first article appeared talking about the idea of responsive design, and then stuff happened. There were media queries, Flexbox, CSS Grid, and now we have this cool new thing, container queries, which we're going to talk in a little more depth in a minute. And by the way, these numbers, don't take them too literal. I found it quite hard to put a number on it because there's obviously a big difference between when something was launched and when something was widely used. So this is more sort of a personal feeling of when I started hearing and using this. So yeah, that was when a star was born. So as these things happened, also a lot happened in the world of UI design, and we got amazing new software. And I'm going to use Figma for that talk. And usually people always say, Christine's going to talk about Figma. It's not so much about Figma, it's about UI design, but I believe that right now Figma has the best features for this and has the largest user base. But you can use any other program you wish. You might be heavily subject to some comments, but I think that's really great new stuff. Also, keeping an eye out for Framer is really worth it. There's cool stuff happening. But we're going to use Figma today. And Figma also came up with fantastic stuff like components, grids, sharing libraries. A lot happened here. And you'll notice that when you work between design and development, in some areas, for example, in animation, it's actually really fast to do that with Figma. So I can animate something in Figma in 1 minute that's going to make a developer cry for a month. So it's also you have to watch out in both directions. But in the world of responsive design, that's not like that. It always feels like we're playing catching up here when we're working UI design, and we're never quite getting there to what you're doing in the browser. And it reminds me of this story, that a very famous children's story in Germany that's called The Race Between the Rabbit and the Hedgehog. Der Wettlauf zwischen Hase und Igel. Fun fact, a hedgehog is an eagle in Germany. So in a nutshell, what this is about is basically simply that the rabbit knows it's very fast, and it's challenging the hedgehog for a race. But the hedgehog is very smart, so the hedgehog tells the hedgehog wife, who looks just like him, to stand at the finishing line. The rabbit arrives, the hedgehog wife says, I'm already here, challenging the rabbit to race back where the hedgehog stands, and therefore the rabbit runs, and the hedgehog wins the race in the end. Now, German parents love this story for several reasons. I think one of them is because nobody gets eaten by a witch, always good for the mood. And the other one is the moral about this story. People love the moral. You don't need to be able to do it. You just need to be smart. Now, I have very strong feelings about this story. And how do I say that? I hate it. I really hate it. I don't like the idea that I have to pretend to be a rabbit. And if you haven't gotten it by now, the rabbit is the metaphor for the developers, and the hedgehog is the designer. And I don't want to race you. I want to work with you. I don't want to pretend I can do something I can't, because I can do cool stuff. So today, I want to use the next half an hour to embrace that we're working together, that we understand each other, that I can show you what we can do in Figma and where we actually need to collaborate, to sit down and talk. And I think we're going to find really cool rounds. So I want to start with the base of it all. We need to understand what a media query is to move on to container queries. So what's the media query? With this audience, I think pretty straightforward stuff. That's what it sort of looks like. At media, min, max, width, you set it out however you want. And you want to have some sort of threshold, right? Some breakpoint where your design changes. So in short, it's something like this. You can decide, for example, when a size would change. Now, in design, it would be something like this, that you have your breakpoint where you would change how your components look, show, hide stuff, or change your the entire layout of your design. Now, we don't have those breakpoints in Figma. We have other stuff. We have auto layout, we have grids, and we have constraints. And with the help of those tools, we can build pretty cool stuff. So we can build relatively responsive pages, like on a frame, which we would use in Figma. But you'll notice it's not going to work for all. We can only use it in a certain range. We're missing our breakpoints. And what we did until now, most of the time, is that we simply set it up like this, that we have a visual representation of those breakpoints. We would set up a frame per breakpoint, and then within that, we can actually test quite nicely. Now, this is still completely fine to work like this, but I want to show you some great new stuff that was just released called variables. And that was released this June, so actually just like a few weeks ago. So who has, sorry, I said one hand show, but it's more. Who has worked with Figma variables in here? Great, quite a few. And who has used them for responsive design? Great, 4 people, fantastic. Who can carry on from here? So, variables, let me give you a quick introduction, because most of you have probably not even seen them. So a quick introduction of how they work. So currently in Figma, we have color, number, string, boolean, and we're desperately waiting for typography and image. And Figma said that these are going to be released within this year. So I'm going to have a few things where it doesn't work because I don't have typography variables. That's going to be solved soon. So they look like this, that we have a name that we give the variable, and then we simply assign a value. So this would be an example for a color value variable. And we can have different collections. So we have a collection for colors, a collection for sizes, and we also have mixed collections. And you're going to see, when we talk about responsive design in a second, why we would mix variables in a collection. Now, the great thing is we can store those collections, as we did before with styles, in shareable team libraries. And that means that you can use them across different projects. And they're very popular to be used like tokens across projects. Because the cool thing is that you can alias them. So you can have your primitives, and you can reference them, so you can have a more semantic setup, which is really, really handy. If you apply them in Figma, that's very easy. In your user interface, just as you would apply a color or a size, if you hover, you can see a little icon, and that would give you a drop-down, so you can then choose any variable from the collection that you set up, and you can also scope them, so only specific ones would show up. So the magic when it comes to responsive design, and in general with variables, is modes. So I want to explain this starting with the modes of all modes, which is light and dark mode, because it's going to make it easier to understand how we use modes for responsive design. So we have light and dark mode. And if I want to add that now to my variable collection, all I need to do is I add a column. And in that column, you can see some stuff stayed the same, but I have some that I flip over. And the great thing is that I applied these variables already to my components. Now, they're going to hold this information. They're always going to show the first column, the default. But they're going to have the information, what happens in the other mode. And so you can set them up in such a way that they inherit. So that means in my design, if I drag them onto a design for a dark mode frame, then they're automatically going to switch over and they're going to inherit that mode. And you can do a lot with modes. You can switch languages, you can switch colors. They're very, very powerful. And we can do the same for responsive design. So what we can do with modes, I can say, you are a mobile mode, and you are a desktop or a large mode, and therefore, please pull in the right component of a component set that fits that mode that I set to that screen. So you make sure that people always use the right component. And we can even set min and max, so we can set our breakpoints, and we can wrap, and so you can see that we can get a much more realistic idea of what this would look like. So in order to set this up, we need all of Figma's features. And this is the moment for shameless self-promotion, because I'm going to do a workshop tomorrow about all of these. So if you feel uncomfortable about your auto layout, this is the moment to work on that, and I'm going to run through all of that from the beginning to the end. So today, a quick intro in that. So you need auto layout variants and variables. They sound the same. They're very different. Min, max, and wrap. And some of them, you can see these were the newly released features. A quick recap for those of you who don't work much with Figma. What is a component set with variants? So that means, perfect example, by the way, a button. Literally, I think we should change counting cats to counting buttons, if we could do that. So a perfect example is a button. You have different states, so you might have a default and a hover state, and you would have them in a component set combined. You always, when you see this purple outline, that's a component set, and you can then, anyone who's designing with it will have all of the information baked into that component. They can be multidimensional, you can add component properties, and they can get pretty complex. So what we're going to do for our responsive setup is we're going to use a component set, and we're going to have different variants in there for the different version that we might want for the different breakpoints. And then we're going to add to our components min and max width. This is also new, simply below size. We can now set this up, and we really couldn't use min and max in Figma till now, which was a huge limitation. So by setting up min and max, we can then work on larger designs, because we can then nest auto layout further. And because we have a min set up, it's now going to wrap nicely into a new line, which is something that also was really almost impossible to achieve in Figma before. And the interesting thing is this min and max, it's not only working for our components, it also works for our frames representing our viewport. So we can sort of cheat our way into using min and max for our breakpoint setup. And then all we need to do is we set up a mixed collection. And so here you can see that I have a small one. So this is, I add my min and max as my breakpoints. Then I have my navigation type that I pull in. This is the variant. So I call that navigation type, card type. And just to make it clear, you can see here S&M refers to the name, and horizontal and vertical. You can name this anything, as long as it's better than my naming convention here. So you can see that it would then pull in whatever I tell it to pull in under that mode, and this is how I can actually get it to get the right component. All I need to do now is connect this with my design. So I need to set those variables. I need to set them on my pages representing my viewport. And I need to use variables. I can't do that by hand, because only with variables I can now swap to the mode. So you can see this is the mode swap. And I tell it which mode I want anything that I drag on there to be inheriting. So now we drag out instances of our components. It's important to add this to the instance. A bit weird, but it currently works like this. And we also need to tell this instance that it is now a variable. So if we do that, it seems like nothing happens. That's because we're on the first default setup. But you can see as we drag it over there, a bit more of auto layout you need to set up your final design, it's going to switch in the correct version. And we can also do that for our card here. So you can see we connect it again. We then drag it over, and it's going to pull in the correct version. Now, in order to set up your design, again, you need to feel comfortable with auto layout. It's not as bad as everybody thinks once you wrap your head around it once. It's really, really actually quite easy. And so now we can add also padding. This padding you could also add to your collection. So even the padding could adapt at different screen sizes. Let's add some more of this card, and let's clip it. And now let's drag it over here to see what happens. You will need, again, to add more auto layout to make it work in your design. And now comes the interesting part. While we added min and max, you can see we get the right component, but we're having this white space. So because we set up our component with min max, we simply wrap. And now we have our design. You also need to do it on the smallest one, even though it doesn't seem like it's important. But as you resize, it's now going to catch up, and it's going to show you within your breakpoints the correct setup. So there's different ways to do this with variables, and you could also use Booleans to do this. And I always feel like developers like this one most, because what you do here, you simply have everything in your component already, and then you set up the Boolean. So I have a burger and nav items, and then I simply say on one mode, show that burger, on the other one don't, and I reverse that. Always important what to do is you need to connect it with your Figma design, so you can also connect it on multiple designs. And now we set this up. It's going to jump to the first default, so it just looks like nothing happened. But as usual, as soon as we're dragging this over onto our screens, here we go, wait for it. You can see now it's still using the default mode. And then we drag it over, and now it's going to switch over nicely, and it's going to activate the correct Booleans. And remember, we can alias, so you can set up your breakpoints and all of that, and as a separate collection, you can alias, and so you can reuse them across your different setups. Now, what I showed you looked really nice, but it was a very simplified example, and today we said we want to be honest about this. So there is a few downsides. So we don't have an overall change in layout. We still need to go breakpoint by breakpoint and design it. It doesn't adapt to grids. This is, for me, the biggest pain point. There is no such thing as fractional units. There is no CSS grid in Figma. So this is really something I'd love to use, but it's not there. Your typography doesn't currently adapt with modes automatically, but as mentioned, this is something we're waiting for the variables to be released, so this should be solved shortly. The last one, which I believe is the biggest one, is you can see that this is not an easy, quick thing to set up. So it needs a lot of team training. Everybody would need to be aware. So just know how your team works. If you're a set team and everybody loves to be really deep into Figma, then go for it. But if you're working with, let's say, every month new freelancers coming in, this might not be the ideal setup. So you might just use like a few parts and ideas from this new approach. So it's not perfect, but it's a really great new helper to get started. So where are we? So we had media queries and Flexbox. Flexbox we're doing pretty good with Figma. We're already there. And media queries, I believe, we can give you a sensible design. We can really understand what we're after. But we want to get there. We want to go to container queries. So what is a container query? And the great thing is that Miriam Susan is going to do, it's like getting really scared, I'll mention her, is going to do a great talk about the rabbit parts of container queries in the afternoon. So you're going to get all the technical things. And I'm going to talk more about just like a light visual introduction to container queries and the design part of it. So container query looks pretty much like a media query. We say add container, we do min, max, and some more magic notation you could do here. We also have some sort of threshold where we can change it. The big fundamental difference is we don't query the viewport anymore like we do with breakpoints. We look at the container that holds our component. And this is really, really powerful new stuff. You can have the same component on a page looking completely different depending on where you place it. So this is really amazing new things for design to be set up. And so it's going to look something like this in my example with the component we had before. So we have a certain threshold where I would, for example, switch this component. Here is a real-life example. So you can see something similar, and you can see how it works nicely across the page as you resize. Now, there is more, which I'm not going to touch on. I just want to have it mentioned. So you can get much more complex with those container queries. So in my card example from before, the little button could also be a container query, so showing and hiding icons. And so you can nest them. You can combine them with breakpoints. I see them a lot combined with CSS grid. There's container query units. And very important to say, I'm talking about container query in relation to size container queries. There's also style container queries, but they're not widely supported yet. So I'm not talking about about those. Talking about the support, pretty good support these days. And you also have polyfills to fallbacks. I always feel incredibly smart saying that. I have no idea how they would work, and I'm really glad Miriam Susanne is here for your technical questions about that. So again, we do not have container queries in Figma, so what can we do? Well, you might say, let's just do what you did before. We're just going to use these modes. We're going to put these modes on, and we're going to swap it in. Well, I'm really sorry, I wish, but that doesn't work. The thing is that I can tell my frame what mode it has, but I cannot, there's no way that I can say, hey, you, component or frame, what size do you have? How did you change? Or in other words, I cannot query. So that wasn't a problem when we're dealing with breakpoints, because we have, 3 to 5 different versions, so we can just tell them. But the thing is, as we start working with container queries, and they might be highly nested, then that's going to be, you sort of could make it work, but it's going to be really tedious, especially if you add and nest more and more. You're going to lose control over this. Also, another thing is things like you might have them set into columns, responding to columns. You can make that what doesn't take the column as a parent, but you can make it work in CSS. But this is just nothing that you can do in Figma. It's never going to look at a column, even if you nest it in a frame as its parent. So how to query when you can't query? Should have really called a talk like this. So let's look at them. So how are they set up? Well, the thing is, we query the container. But actually, all the responsive information is held by the component. And we can do that in Figma. That's fundamentally what we do in Figma, that we set up those components in our design. So we can go back to our old friend, the component set with variants, and we can set up the variants as we did before, but this time we're going to use them to set up our different container queries. And before I move on, I want to make very clear that this is not about designers coding. But if you do, go on, I love it, but it's not about developers coming into Figma resizing components. It's really about communicating a final, well, as final as these things get, design idea and decision between design and development, right? So that's why I really like to do all of this work in the background, and I recommend that you find some space in your Figma file that you clearly label that this is your playground file, where you're finding this magic sweet spot of your components. So you might do quite a bit of testing depending on what you work with. You would add different content, you would try it out with some edge cases, and then you can find this space where you believe that this is how this component, thinking of container queries, could behave. And once you've found these numbers that you're after, what you can do is you can go back into your component set, because this is what you're sharing with everyone. And this is where you want to add that information. So I add my min-max, I add a bit of description. And what I like doing is I like calling that property at container and then naming it the size that I gave it. Now, that's nothing. That's no real notation in CSS. That's not going to do anything in the background. And I can feel some people on Twitter will get really angry about me doing this. But it might be, I believe that it might be a good idea just to communicate, because how it's going to be used is that designers are going to use the instance, and then they're going to see a property called @container. So even if they don't know what this is about, they're going to ask you. They're not going to think that this is something else. And in development, they're also going to see @container. They can open a playground for the properties, and then they're going to see the different versions. They're going to see something min, max, @container. So it's going to make people aware that this is new roads that we want to go. Can we push this further? Well, with some components we could. So what we can do, because we have our min-max, now we use it on the frames, but we can also use it on the inner parts of our component. And what I could do to set this up, I could use it on the left-hand side, so my image, and on my right-hand side block, and I could add min-max here. And so I can then further add it to the outside, and I can use my magic little wrap that I got since a few months. And now this component would automatically wrap. So it would look pretty much like the real container query, the real component that I'm after. Be aware of the fact that if we inspect this in Figma, it's always going to show up as Flexbox. So if you would, I've seen people setting this up with CSS grids and stuff. No matter how you set it up, you can switch between RAM and pixels now. That's already nice. But it will always translate to Flexbox. So you would need to communicate any other setup, or at least say that this is all we have in Figma right now. So again, looks pretty nice. Some downsides to consider. As I mentioned already, we have no CSS grid. The booleans show and hide with this approach wouldn't work. The typography wouldn't switch automatically. Colors and things, nothing would switch automatically. It's really just if you want to change the layout direction, you could use something like this. And again, you would need a lot of understanding and training in your team to go with this. So you might say, OK, great, let's use this. We can set up our components as container query components. So let's put them on our design. And I tried. Boy, did I try. I wanted to show you this lovely responsive page. And I fell back into my trap of wanting to be a rabbit when I'm not. You could sort of make it work if you really do min-max alerts and then switch it by hand. And in German, we call this a Sisyphus-Arbeit. Arbeit is the German word for work, and Sisyphus was this lovely guy. I'm going to read this. By the way, if I look down here, it's not because I'm shy, it's my prompter. So Sisyphus was a king who was punished in the afterlife for his deceitfulness. His eternal punishment was to roll a large boulder up a hill, only to have it roll back down every time he reached the top. This task was repetitive and futile, symbolizing a never-ending and ultimately meaningless effort. Sounds about right. Yeah? So let's not do that. Let's not go there. We want to do something better. Figma is in code, and that is fine. So let's think back. Let's focus on the actual goal. Why are we actually doing this? We're doing this because we want to communicate that we want to use container queries as designers. And we communicate this as well to our other designers in the team that might consume the component. They might not be involved in building it. But we also want to communicate that to development. So what we can do is we can, as an entire setup of your page, use static representations of your page. So I can hear you being, wait. Do you give me this whole talk to tell me I'm going to set up a static design? Well, yes and no. The design is static, but the component is not. I did all of this testing and all of this thinking in the background. I know how my component works. I know which version of my component is displayed exactly on this representational size. So I have all the information, and there's no better way than documentation. Now, if you know me, I love a bit of documentation, and documentation comes in all shapes and forms. So you might have a really tiny project in Figma. You might just have your components on an own Figma page with some info around it. That is fine, by the way. You might have a separate files pulling in different team libraries, or you might be a total design system wizard, which apparently everybody is these days, and you have this great system about everything online aligned with your code. Now, it doesn't matter. And I'm just going to show you a sort of representative idea of what we could add, and you would have to adjust it to whatever you use. Always use sections, by the way, to document in Figma. So we have our section, we have our component set here. There's more in there. There is like hover states and stuff. I have a bit of a representation of that component. I have some anatomy. I might have some specs. I don't even need specs with the new def mode in Figma. I really like adding a little bit of interactive behavior, which you can do really nicely in Figma as well, showing how the hover states will work. And then this is the important part. So what I would do here is I would be adding that information that in my playground that I found. So I'm just going to, in a very simple way, actually just tell you this is how it behaves, this is where it breaks, this is what looks different. Add some information, maybe add some links on the side on where to go and find more out about this. By the way, not everything automatically is going to be a container query. You would have to tell that container that you want it to behave like this. So the same component might also just live happily in its breakpoints. There might be grids. You can use that for other stuff. So you can also just add that information as well and simply show how across your different responsive setups it's going to work. By the way, documentation is really tedious to do, so a little tip on the side. There's a great plugin called H-Shape Specs, and this is literally how long it takes to do your documentation. Boom, that one click, and it creates all this fantastic documentation for you. The only thing it doesn't have is it doesn't come with the responsive information, so you would need to just add that one frame by hand. But really, really handy. It's free in the Figma community by Nathan Curtis. So how are we doing with container queries? I believe we're doing pretty well. I think we don't have an automation for it, but we can really start designing. And the important and crucial part is if we want to go these new ways, we need to talk. We need to get together and we need to talk about how we want to do this. But I believe that we can make this talk much more effective if we're, as designers, surprise, design. And in that design, we already test. We can already see ideas and what works and what doesn't work with different content. And then we can take this and we can talk with our development team. But we're coming to a table with information here, and we're not starting from right here. So we can make this much more productive, and we can start polishing up the edges, which we always need to do in the browser. It's never going to be like in Figma. And we can start documenting this, and we document this for both of us, for designers and for developers. And I believe that this way we can move this a little bit closer together, and then we can stop racing each other, and we can start embracing each other. And that was a really cheesy sentence. If you want more, by the way, trying to get a hedgehog and a rabbit hug on Mid-Journey is really difficult. So if you want more cheesy sentences, make sure to follow me on all of that and more. And I say thank you very much for your attention. It was a pleasure.
Oh. Excellent. Thank you so much, Christine. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Oh, we have so many questions. I
don't
don't know where to start.
I'm not sure I like that.
I think at this point. I guess I'm just going to start from the start. Sasha is wondering, so wonderful techniques, but does what you showed integrate well with complex design systems? It feels like it would raise the complexity to maintain values in a system.
Yeah, so I believe, this is new stuff that I don't even know if on the dev side you would already implement that. But I believe it's on the horizon and it's going to be there, so you might as well plan for it. And no, it's not something that you can just add like another button or another card to your design system. But I think it's worth having it in the back of your mind and being ready, because it's going to be really, really cool designs that you can achieve with it.
Mm-hmm. Lena is wondering, I've had problems before with Z-index being supposed to behave differently than the level hierarchy. In your opinion, is the Z-index still a missing parameter in Figma? How do you think its implementation could improve the handling?
I don't understand what the setting of...
Yeah, so I guess the question is here. So if you have, let's say, multiple layers in there, so we have a parallax or something like that.
The set index.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you would have to do that with organizing your layers, which sometimes is a bit difficult, especially there's now something, I get that a lot with sticky menus and stuff like that. That it doesn't work perfectly, that's true. So usually if I want to show something like that in an animation, I take it out, I take out all the layers, and then reshuffle the layers, which is definitely not good practice, but it's, it doesn't work very smoothly.
Okay. Do you have any recommendations for documenting accessibility features for developer who will be building the product?
With container queries?
Oh, in general,
or in general.
This is just...
there is, I'm not an expert on this, and I feel there's a lot of people that do really great work on it. So, but there is really great plugins. I think Stark is one of the ones I used that I really liked.
I think also eBay came up with something a while back. I think maybe 2 months ago or so. I don't remember what it's called. eBay Accessibility Figma. Probably going to be.
I wouldn't know which one, but there is fantastic stuff out there, and I would say look at one of these plugins, and you literally add them to your, like most of them, the good ones, you would need to pay a little bit, but that what makes them good as well. They would automatically alert you if you, for example, use certain things that wouldn't be in line.
I remember we had many conversations a couple of years ago when we were wondering, well, the design part is great, but then we need to bring it as soon as possible in the browser so we can actually, figure out all the fine details, finesse all the fine details of the UI there. And I guess the question from Lisa is kind of building on that. How do you rate the effort of building all those states with variables versus less questions or bugs in development? Like, I guess, when do you stay in Figma to do all of that?
Yeah.
And when do you go into code and fix all of that? Like, where do you
So I'm going to give you the professional design answer.
Excellent.
It depends.
Excellent. Right, let's move on.
And it depends. Like, I get it also a lot where people like sort of secretly say, by the way, I just make a component and then I have my developer, like we're like sitting next to each other, we get along really well, and I give it to him and he just like, him or her, sorry about that, and they just like work on that, and then we come up with, I don't document it, is that bad? It's like, no, if you have a team where it works like this, then it's great. Just think about that developer might, I'm not going to say die, but just leave the company. Someone else might come in, and also others might need to know what you're working on. So it's a little bit of documentation I would do. But if you're working in a team like this, then we had that in the other talks as well. You document, you do all of that because you might be working with a team at the other end of the world, not even speaking the same language. You might want some security in a larger corporation. But if you're a tiny startup and you're just like, then take the easy road.
There are a couple of questions about handoff. One of them is, at which point and in what state would you hand over your design to developers? Are you using the dev mode in Figma or still using a special page on your Figma file? Have you discovered any better ways?
So I think we talked about this. Know if we should even call it handoff, and we came to the conclusion it should be called a boomerang because it always comes back. So I don't believe in a handoff as such, but I believe that there is a handoff like to sort of a place where we document our things. And again, it depends on your team, but I would put it in there. And I personally like having it in Figma, obviously, because I like Figma. And I think you can be really advanced these days with the new dev mode. So I'm not a developer. I just looked at it from a designer's point of view, but it's very powerful. You can do a lot of stuff. You can connect it with a lot of developy stuff. And so I think it's becoming very powerful, and I know that Figma is really pushing this as well because they know about this. So I would document in Figma, a little bit like the basic thing is what I showed you, just have your component, you're going to have your components in Figma anyways. So even if you move it out to something like Zero Height or Supernova, then you're always going to need to have it in Figma anyways. And I think the plugin, Nathan plugin, is really, really great to helping you to speed up that process. Yeah,
I think it's interesting that we often speak about these cool tools and options and techniques and so on, but I think some people feel a little bit trapped because I don't know how many of you are actually working not in Figma most of the time. Okay, there's a few people. So I'm happy to be working with a company, an organization that is very much stuck in Adobe XD, and they are very excited about seeing all these wonderful things coming available in Figma. And they really couldn't find a way to move to Figma easily. Is there any, like, if you, let's say, have to migrate, and that's probably a reasonable path, like given just all the potential that Figma has now, to migrate to Figma, what would be the right path? Is it just really starting from scratch, trying to rebuild and recreate it all in Figma? Is there any sort of bridge, plugins? I don't know.
I mean, there is plugins and stuff, but I haven't seen something where you just press a button and it migrates it. If someone knows, then please let me know. I don't know. I mean, working in XD, it's very unfortunate. They might.
Sorry, everyone.
But I mean, it's got to be. Don't want to bring the bad news, but it's going to be Figma anyways. But there is people that work in Sketch still, and they're very happy with it, and it works for them, and all their stuff is on there. So you can use that. They also do great new features and stuff like that, so you can use that. I would just say use a UI software.
Yeah, but if you are designing in Photoshop, designing UI in Photoshop, then
that is not a UI software. I mean, that just cannot do with it.
Yeah. So we can talk about this later, if you want, right? The one question that came up relatively quickly, actually, was how do variables connect with design tokens? So is it like, do you use design tokens through a plugin like Token Studio? Do you not use them because of variables now? Like, or are they different? Like, how is all of this connected?
So it's very interesting because when they released it, they were asked for years and years to have tokens in Figma, and they explained why they called it variables, because variables, as you saw today, we can use them for responsive design. They're very powerful when it comes to prototyping, by the way, and so this is why they're not called variables, but which is also a problem because they do sort of everything, but essentially if you want tokens, then variables are, I would say, tokens. And even if there's a new little box they just released, I think, a few weeks ago. If you, on the settings of your variables, where you do the scoping, you now have also something where you could have a Figma name, and it aligns with a code token name. So you can give it different code token names and align it like that. Yeah, I mean, Token Studio is really powerful. I don't know. I would have to have a look at that, how they're dealing with variables, but I'm pretty sure that they cover this as well.
Yeah, I think so as well. OK, we have like 3 more minutes for maybe 2 questions. One of them coming from Francie. Do you have any best practices on how to connect the variables to GitHub, etc.? And will it be possible to add calculations inside the Figma variables? Because we use calculations in Token Studio to simulate typography calculations, responsive typography. Is this coming to Figma? Well.
So I believe, I don't know, but I believe that there is going to be some logic hopefully added to them, because you see when you use them in prototyping that there you have logic and you can do calculations and you can do conditional statements. So I believe that that's also going to solve that whole media query issue. And currently we can't. So you cannot say two times the size of something, or like simple things like that, which you would want to use. That's not working. But you can connect it. If in dev mode there is a place where you can connect it. There is a lot of stuff about it. I would say something wrong because I'm not an expert on it, but there is a lot of things. And yeah, I'm very excited about hopefully having those releases and having that calculation and more logic added. But it's definitely just the start of variables. And that's also Figma is asking for a lot of feedback. And so if you're interested in that, it's also really worth adding, also as developers, what you want to see. And they really react to it. It's not just some page where it's going to like go to a black box. It's really, they're really, really listening to that community.
And then the final question, I think, coming from Matthias, it's a long one, but I'm going to try to shorten it. Many people got a little bit worried, right, with Adobe buying Figma. Many people got worried also a couple of times with pricing plans in Figma changing. So there is a bit of, I wouldn't say like lack of trust, but there is a bit of concern for sure. So Matthias is wondering, these techniques are awesome, thanks for sharing, but what's your take on the long-term sustainability of the Figma platform? Especially now that we add more and more critical product logic and knowledge into the service. I like Figma, but I'm missing the interoperability with local files. Maybe Figma API could be answer to these questions?
So, yeah, I mean, there is changes in pricing. I don't work for Figma. I'm not on their marketing team. So, but a lot of the free stuff has gone away. They're growing. They're also having a larger team and higher costs. So I don't think it's per se bad to pay for good software. Also, by the way, the modes, you would need to be on a professional plan, and you not on all plans can you use numbers of modes. So you can add certain number of modes per plan and stuff like that. And also dev mode is going to cost you something to look and inspect your files, but it's much more advanced. So yeah, there's going to be changes, but I think it also simply has to do with Figma growing. So I'm not so worried about it. Local files, you can download your Figma files and stuff like that, but it works pretty well with the cloud-based version. Or am I getting that wrong?
No, that's right.
I haven't heard much need for that, but I might be wrong.
Okay, so maybe now that we have exactly 14 seconds left, there were a couple of questions actually about your favorite Figma plugins.
Oh yeah, that's a big one. Hopefully
you have 4 seconds left.
No, give me more. The H-Shape Specs plugin that I showed. I have a whole thing which I did actually with Smashing with it. You can find that online on the Smashing Meets. I did a whole thing about pulling in data with Figma. There are some really great free plugins. Google Sync plugin, Kernel plugin. Oh my God, there are so many more. It's like if you
well, maybe we should be expecting. I heard you write incredibly beautiful and detailed posts on Medium.
I do. Sometimes on Smashing, sometimes on Medium.
Well.
So yeah, if you follow me, there's a lot of stuff, and I have also I show my favorite plugins usually.
Yeah. And also just in general, of course, Christina is going to run a workshop tomorrow on Figma. But also, I highly encourage you to follow along on Moon Learning, which is a wonderful platform where you can find a lot of videos and you can get all of it in. Right, and like what? I don't know how many hours of content you have now. 70 days?
20 hours.
20
I
hours.
keep it very small.
Okay.
And redo it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.